They say that the average kid today is outside for 4 to 7 minutes a day, but they're on screens for 4 to 7 hours. And so it sort of spurred something into me. I thought, well, I wonder how long we're outside. And so we had this little adventure club that we were getting together with, maybe 18 to 20 hours a week. More in the summer, less in the winter. We're in Michigan. That's sort of where we were at. And it added up, Zan, to be about 1,200 hours a year, was exactly the amount of time that kids were on screens. It was 1,200 hours a year back in 2013 or so. It just stopped me in my tracks.
Hi, you're listening to the Zan Tyler Podcast.
When my husband and I decided to homeschool our children, one of the hardest decisions was choosing resources and curriculum. BJU Press Homeschool was the answer. My kids are drawn to the colorful illustrations and interesting facts. They look forward to their video lessons. The teachers are so creative and the special characters hold their attention. My youngest is a hands-on learner. Each of her subjects has engaging activities. The Bible and biblical principles are woven throughout the curriculum. It's not just a verse here and there. It's in the illustrations, the stories, the example problems. BJU Press has all the core subjects we need for kindergarten through 12th grade, and some fun electives too. They give me the freedom to choose what's best for each of my kids. A full grade kit with distance learning videos for one. For another, I'm going to teach most of the subjects and use videos just for math. BJU Press Homeschool has made it possible for me to be a wife, a mom, and an educator.
Welcome to the Zan Tyler Podcast. I'm your host, Zan Tyler, and I'm so glad you're here for this very first episode. I've been wanting to do a podcast for a really long time, and now is just the right time. I'm doing this because I loved the 21 years I spent homeschooling my own kids, and because homeschooling works. It works academically. The test scores demonstrate it. College admissions counselors, military recruiters, and employers are actively pursuing our homeschool graduates. But more importantly, I believe that the process of homeschooling strengthens our families as we learn together, serve others together, worship together, and just have fun together. When I started homeschooling, I was threatened with jail by the state superintendent of education. I was scared and literally all alone. We didn't know one family in the world who was homeschooling at the time, and I had very little knowledge of how to homeschool. So I have dedicated my life to providing the support to moms and dads I would have given my eye teeth to have as a young homeschooling mom. Whether it's been starting state or local organizations to provide support for moms and dads, lobbying for good homeschooling laws at the local and national level, working with publishers to develop robust resources that support our faith, or speaking around the country on homeschooling. My heart's desire is to encourage, inspire, and equip you for what can be the most rewarding adventure of your life, but also the most challenging adventure of your life. Each week on the Zan Tyler Podcast, I'll have a different guest to inspire and encourage you. Guests like Rick Green, Ginger Hubbard, Todd Wilson, Lanissa James, and Ginny Yurich. Speaking of Ginny, it's such a privilege to welcome her as my first podcast guest. Ginny is a speaker, podcaster, and author of 1,000 Hours Outside. She's funny, smart, and a ray of sunshine herself. And I think this podcast can revolutionize your homeschool life. I'd like to welcome my dear friend, Ginny Yurich, to the podcast today. Ginny, I am so excited to have you here with us. You are so vivacious and you have such a powerful message for moms that I don't want to say too much because I can't wait to get started and have people hear your story. So I want you to start with talking about what it was like to be the mother of young children and you felt frustrated and really didn't know what to do.
Yeah, I felt like I was failing, constantly, and I wasn't really used to that. I think we go through life and we're pretty competent at the things that we're competent at, and we all, I think, tend to gravitate toward the things that we're naturally good at. So all of a sudden, I have this baby, I didn't know what to do with them, and
Okay,
cried
so
all the time. And
let me tell everybody how smart you are. So Jenny has her BS in mathematics and her master's degree in education. And so we're talking to a smart woman here. Okay, go ahead.
Well, don't you feel like it's like you kind of tend to go towards those things that, it's like, oh, pretty good at math, so I got a math degree, and I always like teaching. I was teaching from a young age in church and Sunday school and things like that, and taught piano lessons from the time I was 15. So just was always in this vein of doing things that I felt comfortable doing. And then all of a sudden, this little person, shows up on the scene, and I thought I had a plan, Zan. It's like a lot of my friends were able to make some sort of a schedule work, where they had these like different time blocks. And I mean, that did not work for me at all. It didn't work for him, and, all he wanted to do was nurse, and really wanted to be engaged with the environment, never wanted to sleep, not at night, not during the day, none of the sleeping. And then we had three kind of right in a row where we had three under three for a bit of time. And I was just drowning. It's like you have these insurmountable amount of needs that you can't keep up with. And so I felt like a failure constantly, and I dreaded it, and I loved them, and I wanted to love that season. But it was just too much. It was too much to handle, I think, for one adult. And I never really found my footing. We tried all these different programs. I was constantly sort of looking for an answer. It's just like, how can I be mildly successful at this? But was really lost for quite a bit of time there.
Okay, so what happened? What changed things for you?
Well, I kind of think you have stories like this, sometimes where there's just one random thing, and you look back and you think, well, what if that wouldn't have happened? And I've heard you tell some real cool stories. We went to a MOPS program, so that's mothers of preschoolers through our church, and we knew we were going to homeschool because I've been in the public schools. So we I've been in the junior high and the high school, so I knew that really wasn't the place that we were going to be sending our kids. And then the year that I got pregnant, full day kindergarten. Kind of swept through Michigan where we live, and the bus came at 8 in the morning and didn't get back till 4:45. It was so academic heavy. So, we just knew we were going to home educate. And I had a friend who sat at my MOPS table, and she was also going to homeschool. And she had one kid that was a year older than our oldest Jackson, and so she was starting to research, like she was a year ahead, so she's doing all the legwork here, Zan. I didn't have to do any of it. So she came to MOPS one day and she says, um, Charlotte Mason, says that we should be outside for 4 to 6 hours a day. And I didn't know who Charlotte Mason
Whoa,
was,
yes,
I
yes.
didn't know. I just thought, well, that's absurd. Who does anything for 4 to 6 hours, right? All these programs are 45 minutes or 30 minutes. It's a lot of input for not that much output. It's a lot of work to get kids to a 30-minute program or 45-minute program. And so I just thought, well, this is going to crash and burn. It's going to be like that 45-minute program times 10, all this time. But she asked me if I would go along with her to the park. This was back in 2011. It's been a long time. It's been over a decade for our family. And so we brought a picnic lunch and a picnic blanket and spread out on the grass. And I just thought, what are these kids going to do? This is an awful idea. But you want to make friends too. It's hard to build friendships when you have all those little kids. They're always interrupting. But anyway, it turned out to be, I say it's the best day of my life. Josh always feels like I'm exaggerating, but really it was, because it was the first good day I had as a mom. I hadn't had one yet, and our oldest was 3 years old. I'd had all these days where I struggled, and what happened was I sat on the picnic blanket, under the blue sky, and it was beautiful out, and I had a conversation with a friend, and we each had a babe in arms and two little ones running around, so there was four kids total, and they just played. Um, and I don't even know what they did, but I felt like refreshed, and so did they, and everyone was happier, and it was just sort of like the whole package all in one. Here was something that made us all feel better. And so back then we just sort of switched how we were scheduling early childhood and kind of formed Greta Eskridge calls it an adventure club. We didn't have a name for it, but
Oh,
just a
I love
couple
that.
families. Isn't that cute? She has
Yes,
a whole
that's
book called
perfect.
yeah, adventuring together. So that's kind of what it was. And it was just a couple families. We try and get together on the days when the weather was tolerable, because that's what Charlotte Mason says. Whenever the weather's tolerable, she gives that caveat for 4 to 6 hours. And really, my whole life changed in one day, where I went from barely surviving to thriving, really. And I just did it for myself at the beginning. I thought, well, if I'm happier, if I'm in a better spot, if I'm more present, then our family's going to be in a better place as well. But what I began to learn and have been learning about ever since, continuing to learn, is that when we step outside, and the parent or the caregiver doesn't have to direct. This isn't about putting together a scavenger hunt or anything like that. It's about just stepping out, and that helps kids in every facet of their development. From their cognition to their social skills to their emotional health to their physical well-being, and to their spiritual health as well. And it does the same thing for the parent. So you just get so much out of it. It reminded me of that verse that says, "His yoke is easy and his burden is light,"
Mm.
because I had felt like I was carrying a very heavy burden for 3 years, and then all of a sudden felt like I had a weight lifted.
Okay, so let me ask you this. So I'm going to take all of my grandkids outside, and their ages 2 to 15. Obviously, the older ones, I mean, they're very interested in interesting and engaged in life. But what do I do with the 2 and the 4-year-olds if we're out for extended time? Are they really going to figure out how to entertain themselves for that long?
They do. I mean, surprisingly, they do. There is this pediatric occupational therapist. Her name is Angela Hanscom, and there's a couple of these pediatric occupational therapists, Zan, who've written books. So they're on the front lines, sort of seeing the decline in skills of children. They have wait lists for occupational services, that are a year
Mm-hmm.
long. You can't
Mm-hmm.
get in. So they're seeing this explosion of need. And Angela Hanscom, she wrote a book called Balanced and Barefoot. It's a fantastic book. I mean, I think every parent, every home should own this book. And she talks about just the power of play. And but one of the things she says is it can take kids up to 45 minutes to develop their play scheme. So, it can take a long period of time for them to figure out how they're going to play, what they're going to play, what are they going to do with their time. And so often, we have these sort of uncomfortable feelings because they're whining or they're bored, but if we can just sort of take a deep breath, push through it, say, "I believe in you. I know you're going to find something to do," that type of thing, then as time passes, they're really pulling on their own interior resources to figure out what to do. And that's good for them for the entire length of their life, to learn how to draw from their own insides and not have to rely on the stimulation of others, the stimulation of screens, which is a big thing. And in the long run, they're going to be more creative and more innovative.
I love that. I was just waiting to hear your response to that. I just remember when my boys were growing up, they lived outside and they started digging holes in our backyard because we were in a subdivision then, not the country. So before we knew it, we had all the neighborhood kids over there and they were building these underground forts and these holes. And when we decided to sell, it took us like a week to fill the holes in our backyard. But, it was just a natural thing for them to do, and I've really enjoyed reliving my kids' childhood reading your book. And so tell me where the 1,000 hours comes from.
Well, so I think we said before, I used to be a math major, and I had read the statistic. It's in Dr. Scott Sampson's book, but it's from the national. It's called "How to Raise a Wild Child," but it's from the National Wildlife Federation, where they say that the average kid today is outside for 4 to 7 minutes a day. So it's the average
Scary,
free play
isn't it?
outside is 4 to 7 minutes, but they're on screens for 4 to 7 hours. And so it sort of spurred something into me. I thought, well, I wonder how long we're outside. And so we had this little adventure club that we were getting together with, maybe 18 to 20 hours a week, more in the summer, less in the winter. We're in Michigan. I think it would be flip flopped if you lived, further south or other locations. But that's sort of where we were at. And it added up, Zan, to be about 1,200 hours a year. which was at that time was exactly the amount of time that kids were on screens. It was 1,200 hours a year back in 2000, 13 or so. And it just stopped me in my tracks because I
Mm,
could look back over that year at the depth. I mean, we have such deep friendships, Zan. I can't, it's really hard to even put into words these friendships that, and some people have moved and some people have gone to different stages of life, but you still run into them and you have like such deep relationships because you've had all these experiences together, and we've laughed and we've explored and we've had all these moments and moments with our kids, and it just gave us such a full life. And I thought, well, what if all that time had gone to screens? Not that we're
mm, mm.
anti-screen, but what an
Right, right.
imbalance.
Mhm,
There's so much
mhm,
life lived there. And in fact, when people take on this mission of aiming to have 1,000 hours outside of time in a year, my favorite thing they say is, I would have missed this moment, if not for being intentional about getting outside. And that's sort of how I felt. So back in 2013, blogs were kind of all the rage, and we were not running into other children. We're kind of in a populated area in Metro Detroit. No children ever. We were running into grandparents that were on the hiking trails, but we weren't running into kids. And so I thought, well, this has so profoundly changed my life. I'm going to call it 1,000 hours outside. It's a mission or a movement to bring back balance to childhood between real and virtual, and to be intentional about our time in nature because, generations past, society was set up in such a way that protected childhood and protected those open spaces of time where kids could
mhm.
dig holes in the backyard, but today it's not like that. There's so much pressure to enroll in this and make sure you're not falling behind, and using childhood as sort of this college application process that starts at age 2 or 3. And so just really giving the permission to play, celebrating hands on real life. And so I called it 1,000 hours outside because it was catchier than 1,200 hours outside. I need
Plus,
a
it
little
gives
hook
people a little
there.
bit of grace,
A
you know?
little wiggle room. And it goes
Yes.
along. That Angela Hanscom, who wrote Balanced and Barefoot, she's the pediatric occupational therapist. She's saying 3 hours a day is sort of the ideal, the optimal for kids to be outside. And we've got 5 kids, and you know, everyone has these different situations. I mean, it's not possible to go outside for 3 hours every day. You've got appointments or different obligations. So we have this year-long goal where we're trying to infuse the year with hands-on, real-life living, celebrating it, and modeling to our kids a tool that we can use to strive for balance.
So before we go any further, I just want to tell people what a beautiful book your 1,000 hours outside is, and where I'm sure they can get it on Amazon. Do you have a website or any place they can get that as well,
Yeah, we
Jenny?
have a full store called 1000hoursoutside.com. And actually, Zan, I had a new book that just is launching right now. I'm going to show you. So we have
Oh,
this
great,
activity
great.
book. So we have this activity book that's like this, with just a bunch of different kind of hands-on activities. But then I have this new book. It's not available quite yet, but it will be soon for pre-order. We've had it at conferences, but it's a book for parents. It's called 1000 Hours Outside: Prioritize Nature, Reclaim Childhood, and Experience a Fuller Life.
Oh, that's awesome. So when will that be available to us, Jenny?
That will be available. I'm taking it to conferences now, and it will be available for pre-order on June 15th, and we'll be sending them out about a month later.
So that's going to help, besides doing the hands-on activities that the first book was, this is going to help parents understand the theories behind it and then how to implement it, right?
Right?
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. So, all right, here's the question I have for you because I'm not sure that this is obvious to people. And I think it's so important. And you've addressed it a little bit. But how does time outdoors contribute to a child's well being academically?
Yeah, so that's a big one, right, Zan? And
I think that's so important.
yeah, and especially for homeschoolers, it's like we think about learning. I think everyone thinks about sitting, right? We think
Yes.
about a pencil and a paper and a workbook, getting through our curriculum. And that's what we think about when we think about academics. But what really changed things for me was when I read this book called Smart Moves, also by a pediatric occupational therapist. Her name is Carla Hannaford. She's a PhD. She's 77 years old, and talks about how she didn't learn to read, Zan, until she was 10. She said back then it didn't matter. You know, what a world we live in if it didn't matter. When kids learn
Yes.
to read.
Yes.
It doesn't have
Yes.
to be
How
5. It could be
freeing. It doesn't
8
have to
or
be 6. That's right.
yeah.
That's
That we
right.
could still celebrate them and celebrate their individuality. So, anyway, she has this fantastic book. It's called Smart Moves: Why Learning is Not All in Your Head. And one of the things that she talks about, and this is just one piece of the puzzle, but she talks about how complex movements and increasingly complex movements, so dancing, playing a musical instrument, these type of things, they enhance our brain function and they protect our brain function for the long haul. So she has this statistic that says 76% of elderly people who dance regularly have a 76% less chance of developing Alzheimer's or dementia.
Oh, that's
So this is
amazing.
isn't that huge? And so what
Yes.
she says is happening is that, we have all these neurons, but movement is helping to connect the neurons and to help strengthen those connections. So we have a faster working computer up there. And so if you pay attention to children and their sort of natural inclinations, they progress from, you know, um, less complicated movement to more complicated movement all the way through childhood, if we step back and give them the time to do that. Now what happens in society is they hit 3 and we put them in a preschool class, and so we start to forget that they have this natural progression. So you got kids that aren't, if they're neurotypical, they're going to crawl, they're going to pull up to standing, they're going to start to toddle, then they're going to run, then they're going to start jumping off of things. But then that continues. You talk about riding a bike, learning how to cast a fishing pole. As they get older, they start to specialize, and you've got grandkids that are in those age ranges. So some of them might like to mountain bike, they like to kayak. Our oldest is almost 14, he loves to shoot baskets. So the kids are out there, they're playing frisbee golf. All of these things are complicated movements, and they're constantly challenging themselves when they have the time to climb the tree, to climb a little bit higher, to climb up higher, to cartwheel, to hang upside down and flip off. All these things, to swing and jump off, as high as you can get that swing to go. And this is what kids are naturally doing. And so that's helping their brain work faster. And so, the jobs that are coming for kids, they're geared for entrepreneurs. They say in 2035 that 3 out of 4 jobs will be, had by entrepreneurs. So we need to set our
That's
kids up to have these
amazing.
flexible
Yes.
brains, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
not stuffed with
Absolutely.
facts. And so that's just one piece of it, Zan. I mean, all that movement, it sets their bodies up for the seat work. So with all the running and all the romping through the woods, their eyes are learning how to work together. So their eyes are tracking. And that's going to help them with reading, and they're strengthening their shoulder girdle when they hang from the monkey bars, and that's going to help their whole arm for writing posture. There's so many things about it that um, counterintuitively really help with
Yes,
academics.
that's right, because we worry as moms if our kids are outside too much because we might be neglecting some of the book work. But really, in effect, what you're telling us is that it is really undergirding and enhancing their academic abilities.
Yeah. Yeah. So our home education journey has been one where, if my kids were out running around outside, I used to call them in for their book work. And now I flip-flopped. I'm like, I can do that book work anytime. We can do it in the evening, we can do it on a rainy day, we can do that anytime. But this time where they're outside and they're playing and they're being creative and they're moving their bodies, that's really worthwhile. And so I have learned to interrupt less.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so I've got a couple more questions for you. This one really fascinates me. So many of us in homeschooling are concerned about, not only the academics, but where our kids are spiritually. So how does time in nature help our children spiritually?
It's interesting. This is something that I've been learning about over the past couple years, is that God's creation um, is a mirror of spiritual laws. And He
Mhm.
has given that to us as a gift. So if we're trying to teach our kids about different spiritual concepts like you reap what you sow. That's a big concept. And I think it's important that they know that, that we have to be planting seeds. We should have some sort of a small garden, whether it's in a pot or it's on the windowsill, so that kids are seeing a couple concepts. First of all, you can't get around that. God says he will not be mocked. You can't put in the radish seed and hope to get a flower. So, and what's cool about the sprouts and the seeds and, they all have a different look. And additionally, you put in a seed, for a zinnia, let's say, you put in one seed, you're going to get 50 flowers. This is big. So if we're sowing positive things, if we're sowing love, if we're sowing servanthood, that's just going to blossom. And God has given us, there's so many of those. He's given us the monarch, or butterfly or a moth, to show that we are a new creature. The old is
Mm.
gone. Here is something that's brand new. And so, I think that as we have moved indoors as society, as kids are on screens and they're not touching the real world, we're losing a lot of those lessons that God has handed to us that are right there for us to teach our kids.
One thing I love about this, Jenny, is that instead of just saying, put up your screens or no more screen time or 30 minutes today, you're giving them an alternative. So it's not just a no, 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 but it's a saying no to this and a yes to this other that they will fall in love with. And
Right.
that's
And I
that's
think
that's powerful.
Yeah, I think it's only going to be harder for them when they're parents, I mean, screens are like in the refrigerators now. Have you seen that? I've seen
Yes.
refrigerators that have a screen built in. It's just, and they're talking about this metaverse and this is not retracting. It is only sort of full steam ahead. And so what what I'm hoping is that our kids, by the time they're adults, that they have a sense that the world has something to provide them, relationships, nature, real living has more of a draw than the screens do.
I was just looking at the FPEA program, the Florida Homeschooling Conference in Orlando, and I saw that you did a whole workshop on gardening. And so that's
I
just
did.
yes, yes, it just looked fascinating. We were in Canada, but I'm so sorry I missed you there because I would have loved that and loved to hear you. You're just so vivacious and energetic. All right, let me, as we close, ask you this question: what steps can families take to support a commitment to time outside for their children?
Well, that's sort of what 1,000 hours outside is. We have a little tracker sheet. We actually keep track of how much time we're spending
Oh,
outside.
that's awesome.
And Zan, for the first couple years, people thought it was real silly, but it has spread like wildfire around the globe. I think because it is really something that's easy to pass over. It's
Hmm.
hard to make
Hmm.
time for it and hard to prioritize it in a digital age and in an age where there's a lot of pressures to fill childhood, with the things that like tutoring and that type of thing. And so, that's really my main thing. Um, otherwise we would miss it. So we have those free sheets. They're on our website. They're real cool looking. All these different designs. There's one that looks like a butterfly and all these little pieces. You color in one for every hour. People blow them up real big and put them on their wall, just as a part of their childhood and a way to celebrate. This is good. This is good what we're doing. But I think I always say you need the 3 F's. You need food, you need a first aid kit, and you need friends. And friends make all the difference. It's safer, for one, but also, there's camaraderie for you as the parent, but also for the kids. And our kids, they're pretty resistant about going outside. You would think that they're probably used to it by now, but they don't want to. But if I say we're going to have some friends there, they're in every time. We're always trying to sort of look for age appropriate, cool places to go, different hikes if we can find them. Our brains are wired for novelty, for new things. And so either the screen is going to give it to them or I'm going to give it to them. And so, we have a tall order for us, I think, as parents in this day and age, but it's also a gift. because we're
Yes.
getting to adventure with our kids and we're getting to have these foundational memories that we wouldn't have had if we were just kind of shooing them out the door to play with the neighborhood kids. Now we get to go along and and have that for our whole family.
I love the fact that you shared that your children can still be resistant sometimes, because I think we need to be braced for that as the parents and as the grandparents, that even though we're taking them outside to have fun, they might not necessarily jump all over it every
Right.
time we mention that. So that's good advice. That kind of prepares us to be a little perseverant and to know what to expect. Well, Jenny, is there anything else you want to share with us, and things I might have forgotten to ask you, or things that are on your heart to share with parents today?
Mm. It helps the kids with their social skills too, which I know if you're a new homeschooler, we're always sort of concerned about. But, kids are learning how to work through resources and cooperate and collaborate,
I love
when they're
that. Yes.
playing. And they have no there's no adult direction, and these are lifelong skills where they're learning to assert themselves but not too much, and the kids are intrinsically motivated to keep playing. They want to play, so they're going to make sure that that kid's not going to run home crying, right? They're
Yes.
they're really trying to sort through that, and it's so good for their social skills as well. The benefits are just far and wide and deep. I'm continuing to learn about how even just simple sunlight exposure. Zan, if you go out in the morning, the sun goes through your eyes right to your brain, and your body releases serotonin. So let's get these homeschool families out in the morning.
And not just
We
the
always tend,
kids,
I
but the
think,
moms.
moms need that. That's
Yeah, that's
the
right.
chemical that makes you feel good, right? And I think a lot of homeschool families, they fall into the schedule of, using the morning to do all their book work, and then the afternoon is more open. But man, we need that. We need that dose of sunshine in the morning that releases that serotonin. We have all these body processes that are dependent on the day and night cycle. And so we have to expose our eyes and wake our brains up, and then that serotonin, that's what turns into melatonin at night, right? So this is what gets everyone nice and sleepy at the end of the day. So I'm just continuing to learn. I'm continuing to be blown away that there's more and more and more that continues to come out. The benefit of simply stepping out the door.
Well, okay, Jenny, I have to tell our listeners this, because I just have never heard this before. So you've been hearing from Ginny Yurich, and I was reading through your bios online. Jenny is not only a wonderful homeschooling parent and author, she is a thought leader in the world of nature-based play and its benefits for children. And I think it's so important that we understand the importance of the movement, and you being a thought leader in that. I can remember as a young mom reading David Elkind's Power of Playbook, and it just
Mhm.
changed my life, because having sat in school for 16 years, I had no idea there was power in play. So,
Right.
Jenny, I just want to thank you for all you are doing for homeschooling and for moms everywhere to get their kids out, because the more I'm convinced, the more outside time the kids have, the happier they are. And
Right.
you are a dose of sunshine yourself. And so all I can say is, if it makes us all more like you, then we need to all get outside more.
Oh, Zan, you're so sweet. Congrats on your podcast.
Well, thank
I'm so
you.
excited. It's so needed. You just have a wealth of information. Josh and I are always impressed with you and have been so encouraged by your journey and all that you share and you're so open with. So thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. And as always, it's a pleasure. Will you come back?
I would love to.
Okay. Thank you, Jenny.
Thanks, Zan.